Hello, I'm Stephen Braun, and thank you for joining us for this week's Q&A with Elizabeth Foundation for the Arts member artists in our studio program. This week, we will feature an interview with Michael Eade. Before we get started, I would like to remind you to consider supporting the Elizabeth Foundation for the Arts and any of our three programs. Details are available at efa.nyc.org. I had the pleasure of interviewing Michael Eade last night, July 1st, and it's my pleasure to present the interview to you now. And I love the pot.
The pot's great. The broken pot I found. I pick up things on the street like a good New Yorker, street finds. That pot fell off that shelf. I came into the studio one day years ago and it had fallen. And I have an oriental carpet below the window there that was my grandmother's, and it fell onto that and smashed. But I put it back together because the root ball was so tight. And I had this other pot from the Berkshires, from friends who have fabulous gardens in the Berkshires, and I just stuck it in there. And it worked.
And it's interesting because street finds, let's call them, have influenced your art through the years.
Absolutely.
And also comprise materials and media for your work.
Yes.
Do you have examples you can show us?
Sure. Actually, I'll show you. I have a little, just down the street on 39th from the EFA, west one block, there used to be, until I think even just last year or a year and a half ago, there used to be a weekend flea market. And I would come, because I come to my studio every day, and I leave at night fairly late. So I would always walk down that block and find things that the vendors had dropped and forgotten to pick up.
How wonderful.
So the studio has some of these things, and I'm gonna plug the phone here and I'll show you. This is the little stuff. Can you see all that?
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah.
And even the thing that holds them was a street find. Yeah. That's my clock. That I bought on eBay.
It was not a street find.
Yeah, I keep shining clocks. So I have one in my studio and I have one at home. So.
Well, and even with these street finds, your work always resonates with imagery or concepts that I think are philosophical and theological and span millennia.
Yeah.
Where did that begin? Or if you can go back to a point in time or a place when you feel it all came together for you.
Yeah. So, I have always liked objects, and my grandparents, particularly my dad's mom, was a collector. And actually, I have some of her things here, and I have some of her oriental rugs here, and I have fabulous things at home. And there's still furniture out west that I inherited. But she also did. She was like she used to copy art and was very good at it. And she's anyway. So I was very close to her, and to both my grandmothers actually, who were both very gifted in handwork. My mom's mom was an extraordinary embroiderer, and used to cut up linen and do tablecloths and things like that. And I would learn how to do stuff with my hands from them, because I'd work, they'd give me materials. And the grandmother, my father's mom, is the reason I use dry pigments. She gave me my first set of dried pigments that she used to use to repair old paintings she bought. And that started me long before I went to Stuttgart to learn egg tempera painting. I had these dry pigments and played around with them. And I didn't really know how to use them until I went to Germany and learned how to actually do egg tempera work. But I had those for years. I still have the original canisters, and some of the I don't use those pigments anymore because I like to keep them in a sentimental way. But they're here in the studio actually. They're in these really old 1920s wood canisters.
And you went to Stuttgart as a student during your studies at Oregon, I believe.
Yeah, it was I was an undergrad at Oregon State in the art department. I was also I speak German. I was doing two majors at Oregon State. So um, my family has a connection to Germany because of my dad was in the Air Force. My brother was born in Germany, and anyway, just because of familial uh, cultural interests and looking at slides growing up, uh, and I started taking German when I was in junior high. Yeah, I mean that wasn't you had to take a language at the schools I went to, so I chose German, and which I was not very good at. But at Oregon State, they had an exchange program with the University of Stuttgart, which is in the southern western part of Germany. It's sort of the Stuttgart and Bavaria are considered the southern parts of Germany, kind of like our south. They actually have dialect there. That
It's Black Forest, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's correct. Yep, and all that mythology and all that stuff. So Stuttgart has this incredible art academy, and 2 years ahead of me, there was a painter who had arranged to go to through the University of Stuttgart, through the University of or through Oregon State University, that formal program. Um, Oregon State University has a really famous nuclear science program. So does the University of Stuttgart. That's how the exchange program started. And this painter from the art department used that connection to connect with the art academy in Stuttgart through the University of Stuttgart, and I took advantage of that, being able to speak some German.
It started
I got
with a
and
scientific
I
program, and then
well, I I matriculated at the University of Stuttgart as a German language student because
interesting.
I don't know anything about science except for my basic biology. But he coached me how I went to the university. I got accepted to the University of Stuttgart through the exchange program. I went there and I had to and I didn't know if I was going to get into the art academy. I took a portfolio. I had to interview with the professors there in order to get accepted and matriculate, and I was accepted. And I spent over a year living there and I studied at the art academy under these. That's where I learned egg tempera painting. Yeah, Herr Lusner was a very famous egg tempera German painter, and he had master courses that I studied with him.
And I'm
Yeah.
sure that was quite a privilege as well.
Yes.
And then you're bringing that back to Oregon,
Yeah.
Germany.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I came back to Oregon back to the Oregon State University. I went as a junior to the art academy in the University of Stuttgart. I came back for another year to finish my degree, um, and I was going to be awarded 2 degrees, one in German and one in fine arts. But then I was very popular in the small art department at Oregon State University, and
That
two of
comes as no
the
surprise, by the way.
they said, well, what are you going to do like when you graduate? And they said, well, why don't you apply for a fifth year? Why don't you apply to this Norma Siebert printmaking scholarship? It's a full scholarship. It doesn't pay for room and board, but you can get a job. And I got it, of course. And I spent a fifth year at Oregon State making prints in they have that scholarship still exists. Norma Siebert was a wealthy Oregonian who um, wow, my memory's going to fail me, but there's some very famous printmakers that started the printmaking program at Oregon State. They have a great print facility there. And I spent a year making woodcuts.
And that was after learning egg tempera.
Yeah,
That's
and
quite a lot going on as you finished your studies at Oregon.
yeah, yep. I was just it was like being on a residency, quite honestly. All I did was go to the art department. I had uh, I had a space in the painting studio, and I had a space in the printmaking studio that was all my own. It was really great, and I made these um, tons of woodcuts and stuff like that. The um, and just think, I've received here at the EFA at the Robert Blackburn. I received 2 fellowships from them, and have continued so many years later with much more advanced printmaking. Um, with full editions now. So, and you've seen them. So.
And I think that's you've been a member artist for years now, contributing
Yeah,
to
13 years.
diversity in the
Yeah.
artist community, and you've also worked or been awarded at the Robert Blackburn printmaking workshop. So I think that's
Yeah.
somewhat
Two,
unique to have an
two,
artist who's worked with both programs.
yeah, and it's such a. I actually encourage fellow members here to apply to those residencies because they're. I mean, you're right in the building. You can do some work in your studio and then jump down to the printmaking workshop, and uh, you know the staff there is so knowledgeable and gracious. It's like a huge learning curve down there, and also it's also because you're sharing this large studio with a lot of other people doing quite a variety of different print mediums. The learning curve is huge because you can see many kinds of prints being made, and you can talk about, we can ask questions. Everyone's very social and friendly because the environment that is carefully tended to. So
So after you finished Oregon, you then went to NYU.
yeah, I moved up to Seattle after graduating. Um, I had a boyfriend I moved in with on Capitol Hill, who I'd met on uh, vacation breaks from Oregon State at fun parties I would go to in Seattle. Um, so and I found a studio down in Pioneer Square um, called, and uh, it was called the Triangle Studios, and some very well-known Seattle artists had started this co-op. Actually, not I haven't thought about this, but not unlike the EFA. They had this whole floor of a 19th century building down in Pioneer Square, and they had divided it up, and you had to be interviewed to get in. Um, and I'm getting some funny notifications here. Oh, there we go. And it was my first professional studio, quite honestly, in Seattle. So, and that's where I got my first uh, state art commission award. That was when it was. This is back in the '80s when Ronald Reagan was elected. He cut all the EFA, all the NEA funding, and my purchase award was canceled by the Washington State Arts Commission. It's one of the reasons I moved. It's one of the reasons I moved to New York, because I had a really unstable financial situation, and I had to learn a trade. So I decided. I've always loved animation. I mean, who doesn't? And NYU, there were 2 schools in the um, mid to late '80s that had the best animation curriculum. One was at NYU, and the other one was at Cal Arts. I think it was Cal Arts, a place in California. And I wanted to go back east because I had lived uh, in Glen Rock, New Jersey, as a kid in grade school because my dad used to work for AT&T, and he was transferred here to Manhattan. So I had lived here on the East Coast as a kid, and I loved it. So it just sort of made sense to come here.
In those days, I mean, I moved to New York in the very early 90s, but I do remember, when you could walk downtown and just artists were everywhere selling, paintings, and these were renowned artists or prominent artists, I should say.
Yeah.
And it was indeed a very, very exciting time in Manhattan.
Yeah, I was either 83 or 84 I moved here. And if you think about that, the East Village was hot. And being a cute young gay guy, I was everywhere. And of course hung out. I was part of the scene, at least not as an artist, but as being present at the openings and things like that. Because I was very fortunate to I roommated with 3 to 4 people on Spring Street between Prince and Sullivan.
Oh, perfect.
In a railroad apartment. And that's how I became an assistant to Louise Nevelson, who lived 2 blocks away. Yeah, because she had done some. At the time, I was in a relationship with a theater and costume designer, John Sullivan, who had been contracted to work with her and create sets and costumes for Eurydice and Orfeo at the St. Louis Opera Company. And I assisted him and met her and became one of her assistants through that while I was at NYU. And that introduced me to the whole art world, like Jasper Johns. Wow, I could, everyone, like, yeah, Edward Albee,
Well,
and everyone was gay. Louise was gay. Yeah, oh God. But the dinner parties were, yeah.
But
so
it's
yeah.
Well, the world was clearly your oyster, being the cute young gay guy in Manhattan, surrounded by.
And I started painting. I ended up with the whole apartment to myself, this 3-bedroom railroad on Spring Street, and I took over the front. The front bedroom became my painting studio, and I started making these big ass paintings. Yeah. While I was making the animation. Yeah.
It's so lovely how things unfolded. And then with all of this in front of you and all of New York City and all of these art openings and parties, at what point did EFA come into your life? How did you find out about EFA?
I can tell exactly how it happened. I might not get the dates quite right, but I received an Algira Emerge Fellowship. They're located in Newark, New Jersey. It's still around. It's a great program. I applied to it. Actually, wow, you know what? The interview for that fellowship was the day before 9/11.
Holy smokes! Wow.
I was on the PATH train to Newark the day before 9/11, and if it had been the day later, I might not be around, quite honestly. So, but I got the fellowship, and one of my I think there were 13 of us. It was for a full year, maybe a little longer, stipend. And the Algira Fellowship creates weekly meetings with established art professionals in the whole spectrum, like curators, artists, collectors, consultant. It's a huge array of people that have been vetted to give you a professional view of how to be a professional artist. With I still have the note. They were printed handouts that they gave you a binder to hold them in so beautifully. I still have it. Um, and I met on one of the 13 or so artists was Patty Coutura. She's a member here, and I ran into her years later. I don't know how many years later. Gosh, it must have been, if I became a member in 2007, maybe in 2005. I ran into her in LaGuardia Place in Soho, because I used to swim at the Cole Center, because at NYU alum, they have this great pool there.
It's a great pool. Yeah.
Yeah, great pool. Yeah, yeah. Yep. They're rebuilding it now. Anyway, I ran into Patty. We were chatting away because we had always hit it off. And she said, I've become a member at the EFA. I said, well, what's that? And she said, well, it's a studio program, blah, blah, blah. And I applied to it. And that's how I applied to the EFA. And I got accepted. They used to have a waiting list. This is amazing to remember this. They had a waiting list. I think I applied and waited for a year to apply. And a year later, they said, well, we'd like to interview you. And those are the people that gave me the jade branch. It's in the window here. And I was accepted. And it takes a while, because the studios have to open up. And maybe half a year later, I was shown this studio that I'm in now. I've never moved studios in the building like some other artists have. And I remember the artist that had this studio had a piano in here. He was a musician or composer. The studio, my God, there was just a piano and some other little things. Look what I've done to it. Oh my God.
And we're so thrilled that you've been a member ever since.
I really,
involved in so many programs.
Yeah. Well, it means a lot to me. And if I can, I've benefited from having a studio here. I mean, I can tell so many stories. So many galleries have picked me up here, finding my work here through the various programs and open studios. I'm showing, I show at a gallery now that is because of an artist on this floor, because of, and I've done very well with this gallery. I mean, wow.
My first open studios for EFA, I think, was in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And yours was the first studio that I went into. And I remember that was when I think the open studios were on one night. And I spent half the night in your studio just listening to you explain your work.
Oh.
Wow. I love showing your work online, the different styles you've had, or the different themes through the years and concepts.
Yeah.
And there's a consistency through the years. But the past few months obviously have, I'm going to say, changed all of us in some way or another.
Yeah.
In many ways for the better. In many cases. So. How has it changed your work the last few months?
Well, I've been making a suite of burned out trees that have life coming back. So it's kind of a metaphor of renewal. It's not. I started with a large piece before the pandemic because I'm from the Pacific Northwest, and my grandfather, one of my mom's dad had lumber mills in Oregon, so I'm very familiar with forest fires and clear cutting and all that stuff. So I'm very dying trees are actually nurturing elements for new growth. Either a fallen tree or a burned out tree actually create a nourishing environment for new growth. So as for me, that's an incredible metaphor. Also, they're beautiful figurations that I like to paint. So and the other, I mean, as a formal issue, the burnt trees, burnt forests have a burned landscapes have a real ecological purpose on our planet. They kill disease, and the hardy plants, the little seeds survive, or animals start coming through the open areas and drop seeds in their pea seeds and stuff like that. And new things grow, and the whole planet's evolved that way. So to me, it's just this fabulous metaphor to utilize. So I've been exploring that and keeping my palette quite tight to gray. I can show you. I finished 4 so far. Here, I don't know. Can you see that?
Yes, and
I've changed the skies. So hold on. So it's the same. There's a seedling that's growing in each one of those, and then little tiny plants. And of course, I use all my gilding in the way that I do. So, and I don't know, I'm just making a whole body of work. I think will be a show in about a year or so from now.
we will look forward to that.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, if possible, could we see the paintings again? And maybe, is there a way to see a little bit of the detail?
Sure. Should I turn the phone, or is
If it's possible, yeah, I think.
Sure. Hold on. Okay, hold on. So here we go. Is that good?
Oh yes, that's lovely.
Okay, and you can see the gilding, and I'll pull back. You can see the sapling and the burnt tree. That's what happens to, and I'm actually using a New York Times article for reference. So here's another one.
To speak to the times that we're in with
exactly.
such promise and with your hallmark voice as an artist.
Yeah. The thing is, like, the gilding looks amazing. See, I'm using a palette that's very restricted. Yeah, and it allows me this. I think they're really, I mean, just formally, I think they're very elegant. So, and you can see I'm using these different stippling techniques.
And thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
And when I've come to your studio, which is every open studio, or when I see that you are accepting guests, I've always noticed distinct works you exhibit which seem to speak to different moments in time for you, either personally or in your career. And I'm wondering, when you commune with your work, what are the works that stay? Or what is the connection with some of these? And if we could talk about that.
Well, you can see in my studio, I keep old works and new works around. I mean, those that aren't in the galleries or haven't sold. So rather than putting them away, because I self-reference my work, if I've spent so much, I mean, my work is very detailed. So if I take the time, I train to make these paintings. It takes a while to kind of get the arc of the movement. I also use, and actually something else to point out is, I think at this point it's a good thing to mention my technique, because all of my paintings start with pen work, and here they are. Oh, let's see. Can you see that? Oh, can you see that or not?
I see you.
Oh, I have to turn the phone.
There we go.
See, and there's
Those look like very special pens, actually.
They're very special. They don't make them. They're all vintage. They're from about early 20th century. And I have, hold on, hold on. I just take this away. This is just a sampling of some of them. I have thousands of them. I buy them on eBay. They're from all over the world. They all have different characters. They all act differently. They're all handmade, and because they're old steel, they also wear down, so and break. So hold on. So I keep a huge stock of them. Um, anyway, so I compose my work with those pens with emulsified acrylic, like at an ink viscosity. I maybe described that to you. And when the acrylic paint at an ink viscosity, I keep it in little film canisters. That's it. I always use Venetian red. It's a Utrecht color. When it dries on the panels of the canvases, it's indelible to the water-based egg tempera, so the lines stay super crisp, and I can get that. So I get the linear composition going and the lyricism of that, and then render it up. So I think that's part of the my interest in my compositions is to have also a lyricism to the content, so that the lines interact and create a rhythm. Kind of like music. I listen to music when I paint. So
What kind of music are you listening to?
I like classical music. Yeah, I actually studied Mahler and at Oregon State, and some other composers. So,
So
yeah,
if
I
for
also
what's that?
I also love American standards music.
Maybe we'll put one as a soundtrack to this when it goes on YouTube.
Yeah.
For the viewers who might be thinking of a professional art career or who are just starting,
Mm-hmm.
what would be the one piece of advice you would give them to keep in mind throughout their career?
Yeah. Well, I've been asked that question quite a number of times, and by young artists that come here in the open studios event, and perseverance, and don't worry about rejection, and have confidence in your work, but also work. Work every day, because I'm not the painter that I was 20 years ago. So I, I mean, I was a good painter then, but my work has changed, and it's changed for personal aesthetic reasons. Um, it's a little hard to. It's always been figurative and landscape oriented, but there's also, I'm excited. I think one thing to keep in mind for a young artist is to be excited about your work and like convey things, because that really drives you. Um, and then and very important are keeping the formal aspects of the work with high integrity, the craft high integrity, and the archival element, the kind of ultimate, so they last. You're going to spend that much time on it, you might as well just do it right, you know.
And
So,
as I've been in your studio during open studios or at other
mm-hmm.
times when you're hosting guests, I do hear you always offering such kind advice to burgeoning artists, no matter
Yeah,
where they're at in their career. And I think
yeah.
that's so lovely. Who
I had
inspired you?
I experienced it, like Louise Nevelson back in the, you know, um, God, I mean, Edward Albee, they all were um, appreciative of a young creative person because they used to be that. So, and they know all of them struggle. Well, Albee didn't struggle so much; he had money, but Nevelson did, Marisol did. Uh, you know, they all know how it is to become an artist and have this chosen path and a vision, and how difficult it is to get it tuned up right to make a life out of it that actually gives you, you know, a comfortable place in the world. So, and I might add that the EFA has helped me with that. Yeah.
And that's really nice to hear. And I will say that, you know, the first time I walked into EFA, I had been invited to a reception by the studio program director, Bill
Yep.
Halia. And,
Yep.
you know, walking in the door, I think we all have a sense, a very palpable sense of pure artist spirit at EFA. It's very unique. And I think
they're careful. Yeah.
What's that?
They're careful. I mean, you know, we're all vetted. They're, you know, you're interviewed by a number of people before you get a studio here. So that I mean, I don't. I'm just assuming. I mean, I've never been told this. But I'm assuming that's maybe part of the you know, the program. I mean, it's a community, and you know, making art is a community. I mean, that's how I became. I there was a different kind of community when I was living in Soho years ago in the 80s, but it was still a community of creatives that had a kindness. I mean, they were competitive, and all that, but that doesn't happen here. But um, but there was still an appreciation of, you know, you can't do it alone. You know,
Right. And there's no guidebook, but there
there's
are a lot of loving.
there really can't be. I mean, you can have it'd be silly because every artist, I mean, there's probably these general categories that we all experience, that we go through, but they're tweaked out in very individual ways, and no story is the same. Yeah.
So then, for viewers who are not already following you or engaging with you in your website, how can viewers follow your work?
It's like, I don't know how to update my website. Like, if you look at it, so, but I use Instagram. It's great. So, and my handle at Instagram is, you know, the ampersand egg tempera. That's it. And I
Instagram.
yeah, Instagram. It's great. Everyone's using websites are okay, but Instagram's more immediate and timely. So,
And then I think people can find you on the Elizabeth Foundation for the Arts website, which is EFA.
yeah, go in the artist member page, because I'm a member. I have a page that gets updated every year. Uh, Natalia and usually takes care. Derek and Natalia kind of maintain that, and they keep it very current. And it's kind of fun because I keep some older work up that is sort of seminal in my development.
Yeah.
But I add new stuff. I always add at least 2 or 3 new things. I think there's 9 or 10 thumbnails that you can open up, and then there's an artist statement that everyone updates every year. It's a great way to. I mean, all the members are really great artists, so But that's one way to learn more about my work, is to go to the EFA member artist main page and then click on me, Michael Eade, and then it opens up.
And who knows if we'll be able to have open studios this year. I certainly hope there'll be a way. And if
I don't know.
And eventually, and I know your studio is always open and brimming with people. So
yeah.
I encourage people to.
Well, I mean, it's located in a fortuitous location on the 9th floor by the elevator. So, it's lit. That's the other thing is I like to work at night, so it's super lit, and it kind of draws people in. So, thank you for saying that. I really enjoy it, quite honestly. I look forward to it.
And I think you definitely contribute vibrantly to the EFA community.
I hope so.
And
I try to.
Michael, I've always admired your work, and it is my privilege to be able to have this interview with you. I can't wait to see the new work you're producing with some of the charred trees and what you showed us this evening.
Yeah.
And I think we'll all look forward to that reception you mentioned in a year.
Yes. I can't wait to invite you and have you there. Yeah.
Well, all the best, and I do hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Me too. Yeah.
Thank you very much.